All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling something, I guess you could say kind of a big question, right? The quest for like the perfect farm. Is that even a thing?
Right. Like, what does perfect even mean when it comes to farming? It's such a uh, multifaceted idea, right? So many factors to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what's perfect for one farmer might be totally different for another. It probably depends on their goals, resources, even like what part of the world they're in.
Totally, totally. And then on top of all that, our understanding of agriculture is constantly evolving. So what we consider perfect today might be totally outdated in a few years.
Okay, so it's a moving target. But luckily, you sent over a ton of stuff for us to dig into. There's that TED-Ed video about the future of agriculture, plus a whole stack of articles about different farming methods, even some fun facts sprinkled in there. So maybe by the end of this, we'll have at least a slightly better idea of what this perfect farm could look like.
This sounds like a plan. Where do you want to start?
Well, one thing that kind of jumped out at me from like skimming through all the material is that there are a few key ingredients that people seem to agree on, like no matter what kind of farm you're talking about.
Yeah.
Sustainability is huge EE,
Well,
right?
absolutely. Can't really have a perfect farm without it these days.
Right, it's got to be like the foundation.
Yeah, it's all about like balancing the needs of the environment with the need to produce food, obviously.
Yeah, because protecting the environment and using resources wisely, that all sounds great in theory, but if it means we can't feed people, then what's the point?
Exactly, exactly. That's something that, like the Texto Pagado source you sent, it really highlights that tension.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they emphasize how a truly sustainable farm isn't just about like organic practices or saving water. It's about thinking long term.
Okay, so it's not just being green for the sake of being green. It's got to be sustainable for generations, right?
Exactly. Can this farm thrive without depleting the land, without harming the surrounding ecosystem? Those are the questions.
Wow, okay. So thinking way beyond just like next season's harvest.
For sure.
And I guess that ties into resilience too, right? Like, can the farm adapt to climate change
Yeah.
or bounce back from like a bad season, a drought or a pest outbreak, something like that?
Exactly. Exactly. All part of that long-term thinking.
So it's like sustainability and resilience are two sides of the same coin,
Yeah, and they both feed into productivity as well.
right? Because a farm can be super eco-friendly,
Yeah.
but if it doesn't produce enough quality food,
Well, then it's not really fulfilling its purpose.
right, so got to find that sweet spot. And
Exactly.
of course, we can't forget about the people involved, right?
Mm.
And the animals. If the farm has livestock, I mean, ethical treatment,
Yeah.
fair working conditions, those are non-negotiables for me.
For me too, social equity is absolutely crucial, and animal welfare, of course.
Yeah, if it's not a good place for people and animals, can it really be a perfect farm?
I don't think so.
Me neither.
But speaking of different ways of doing things,
Yeah.
you were reading about the history of farming, right? All the different approaches over the centuries.
Yeah.
What struck you about how those different approaches have tackled all these perfect farm elements?
Well, first of all, it's kind of mind-blowing how long humans have been messing around with farming.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like every generation is like, okay, we're going to improve on what our parents did. We've got this new technique, this new tool.
Yeah.
But it's like there's always a trade-off.
Right.
Like you solve one problem and another one pops up.
Totally.
Like take traditional agriculture, for example. Small scale, time-tested methods,
Mm.
but often lower yields.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's often the case. And potentially more vulnerable to like large scale challenges,
Right.
like extreme weather events, things like that.
Okay, so it's resilient in some ways,
Yeah.
but maybe not so much in others.
Right. And yet, that's also where a lot of that like deep place-based knowledge resides.
Oh, you mean like,
Yeah, farmers who've worked the same land for generations, they have this intimate understanding of its quirks, its rhythms. That's so valuable.
that's true. It's like they're in tune with the land. But then we swing to the other end of the spectrum with industrial agriculture. High tech, massive yields.
Mm.
But the articles definitely pointed out some serious drawbacks like environmental impacts,
Mhm.
potential health concerns. It's complicated.
It is, and I think that's where things like organic farming come in, right?
Right.
It prioritizes natural methods,
Right.
avoids synthetic pesticides and fertilizers.
Yeah. So it sounds great for the environment and for our health. But can it actually produce enough food and at a price that people can afford?
That's the big question, and it's a debate that's still raging.
Yeah, it feels like we're always chasing this ideal. But each approach has its strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to solve a puzzle,
Yeah.
but the pieces keep changing shape.
I like that analogy.
But where does regenerative agriculture fit into all of this?
That's a great question. Regenerative ag is like the new kid on the block. And it's generating a lot of buzz, no pun intended.
So what's all the hype?
Well, instead of just trying to minimize harm, regenerative ag aims to actually improve the land.
Okay, so not just do no harm, but actually make things better.
Exactly. Rebuilding soil health, boosting biodiversity.
It almost sounds too good to be true.
Right.
But I'm guessing there are some caveats.
Well, for one thing, there's still a lot we don't know.
Like, can it really scale up to feed a whole planet?
That's a big one.
And how do we measure its success over the long term?
Another great point.
I feel like we need more research.
We definitely do. And this need for innovative, sustainable solutions. It's exactly what Logan emphasizes in the TED video.
Oh, right. That video was really something.
Yeah, you remember his call for a second agricultural revolution?
Oh, yeah, that was powerful stuff. It was like he basically said that the first revolution, the one that brought us industrial agriculture,
Yeah.
it was all about squeezing every last drop of production from the land,
Yeah, at any cost.
often at a huge cost.
Exactly.
And now we need to move beyond that model.
And I think that's where it gets really interesting for our listeners, because Loken isn't just pointing out problems. He's offering a vision for what a more sustainable, resilient, and productive food system could look like.
Okay, so less doom and gloom and more like hope.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I like it.
Me too. And Loken's vision, it's all about working with nature, not against it. He talks about these farms of the future. They're these diverse, integrated systems, almost like miniature ecosystems. It's a far cry from like those endless fields of monoculture crops we see today.
Yeah, those just kind of go on forever.
Exactly.
So instead of just one crop stretching as far as the eye can see, we have what, like a patchwork of different plants.
Yeah.
Maybe even some livestock roaming around, trees for shade, all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. And it's not just like aesthetically pleasing, although that's a nice bonus.
Sure.
It actually makes the farm stronger.
How so?
Well, different crops have different needs, right? Different vulnerabilities. So if one crop gets hit by pests or disease,
Nah.
the whole system isn't wiped out.
It's like not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Spreading the risk.
And I bet that variety is good for the soil too, right?
Absolutely. Loken really stresses that healthy soil. It's the foundation of a thriving farm.
Makes sense.
And diverse planting can really help with that. Along with things like cover cropping and no-till farming, all these practices help build up the soil's organic matter.
So it's like richer soil.
Yeah, more fertile, more resilient.
It's funny, we always think of farms as like producing food, but Loken's argument is they should also be producing healthy soil.
Yeah,
Like soil is a crop in itself.
that's a great way to put it.
Well, speaking of which, do you remember that article about those rice paddies in Asia?
The ones that have been continuously farmed for like 1,000 years.
Yes, that's the one. They use ducks to control pests and fish to fertilize the water. And this whole system of canals and terraces to manage water flow. It's like a perfect example of what Logan's talking about.
It is a fantastic example.
Yeah.
It proves that these ideas can work long term.
Right, it's not just theoretical.
And it shows that we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. There are traditional farming practices from around the world that have sustained healthy ecosystems and communities for centuries.
Wow, 1,000 years.
It's about learning from those examples and adapting them.
So taking the best of the old and combining it with the new.
Exactly.
That kind of makes me think about permaculture, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
It's all about designing systems that mimic nature's patterns.
Right.
Like the articles mentioned food forests,
Oh, yeah.
where different layers of plants all work together. Trees, shrubs, ground cover.
Creating a self-sustaining ecosystem.
And it's not just about maximizing yields, right?
Right. It's about creating a system that's beneficial for everyone. The plants, the animals, the people, the land itself.
It's like a farm that gives back to the environment instead
Yeah.
of just taking.
Exactly. But of course, no farm exists in isolation. Loken also talks about the need to reconnect farms with their surrounding landscapes and communities
Yeah, he mentioned those buffer zones,
yes.
areas of wild habitat around the farm.
to support pollinators, control pests naturally, provide corridors for wildlife.
And they can help filter runoff, too.
Exactly. Protecting nearby waterways.
So it's not just about what happens on the farm itself, it's about the bigger picture.
It's about thinking beyond the fence line, recognizing that a healthy farm is part of a healthy ecosystem.
And a healthy community. This makes me think about CSAs.
Community-supported agriculture.
Yeah. They're a great way to connect people with local farms,
I agree.
creating that direct link between the people who grow the food and the
Yeah.
people who eat it.
And CSAs often go beyond just providing food. They can foster a sense of community, educate people about where their food comes from, even empower consumers to advocate for more sustainable practices.
Right. It's like building a food system based on relationships, not just transactions.
You got it. Speaking of relationships, let's not forget about the role of technology in all of this.
Okay, back to the robots and drones.
Uh-huh.
I admit, I was a little skeptical at first about all the high-tech stuff.
I get it.
It's like, can robots really replace the human touch in farming?
I think that's a valid concern, but the key is to view technology as a tool, not a replacement.
Right.
It can help us do things more efficiently, gather valuable data, even address some of the challenges facing farmers today.
Like what?
Well, the articles mention precision agriculture.
Oh yeah, where they use sensors and stuff.
Exactly. Sensors that monitor soil moisture, plant health, so farmers can tailor their practices to each specific area.
So not just treating the whole field the same.
Exactly. It's about optimizing resource use, minimizing waste, making sure each plant gets exactly what it needs.
It's like personalized medicine, but for crops.
Uh-huh. I like that.
And then there's AI, which
Right.
is already being used to analyze data and stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. Predicting crop yields, pest outbreaks, even optimal planting times.
It's like having a super intelligent farm advisor in your pocket.
Right. But beyond just optimizing existing practices, AI could help us design entirely new approaches to agriculture.
Ooh, now that's interesting.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Well, imagine AI helping us develop drought-resistant crops that thrive in arid regions,
Okay.
or pest-resistant varieties that reduce the need for pesticides, or even crops that are tailored to specific nutritional needs.
Wait, hold on. You're saying like personalized nutrition, but on a farm scale.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
That's wild.
It might sound like science fiction, but with how fast AI is advancing, it's not as far-fetched as you might think.
Okay, my mind is officially blown,
Mine too.
this whole deep dive. It's taken us from the ancient roots of agriculture to the cutting edge of innovation.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And it's incredible to see how far we've come and how much potential there is for the future.
It's definitely inspiring.
But amidst all this talk of technology and innovation,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that the heart of agriculture, it's still about people.
Couldn't agree more.
It's about the farmers who work so hard to feed us, the communities that rely on them, and the connection we all share with the land.
Beautifully said.
So, before we get too carried away, dreaming about robot farmers and personalized crops, I want you to live back down to earth for a moment. What are some things our listeners can do, like right now, to support this quest for a more perfect farm?
Well, that's a great question. Honestly, after all this talk of second revolutions and high-tech farms, I think it's easy to feel like change has to happen on this huge global scale.
Right, it can feel kind of overwhelming.
The most powerful thing any listener can do, I think, is to become a more conscious eater.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, start asking yourself some questions. Where is my food coming from? How is it grown? What are the impacts, good or bad, of my food choices?
So it's not just about what we eat, but like the story behind it.
Exactly.
Knowing whether our produce traveled thousands of miles,
Yeah.
or came from a farm down the road, or whether the farmers are being treated fairly, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Exactly. And once you start asking those questions, you naturally gravitate towards choices that align with your values.
Yeah, you start making different decisions.
Maybe you seek out local farmers markets or sign up for a CSA like we talked about.
Right, you're putting your money where your mouth is, literally.
Uh-huh, exactly.
And you're supporting those farmers who are already doing things differently. Experimenting with sustainable practices,
Right.
building more resilient systems.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the impact of just having conversations about these topics.
Oh yeah, just talking about it.
Talk to your friends, family, even your local grocery store manager about what matters to you in terms of food.
So raising awareness.
Exactly. The more we raise awareness, the more we shift demand. The more things will change.
Like a ripple effect.
Like that.
Starting with our own plates.
That's a great way to put it.
I feel like that's something everyone can do, no matter where they live or how much they know about agriculture.
It's about making conscious choices, one meal at a time. And, if you're feeling really ambitious, there are always opportunities to get more involved.
Like what?
Well, you could volunteer on a farm, advocate for policies that support sustainable ag, or even just learn to grow some of your own food.
See, that's where I get stuck. I have a black thumb. I can't keep anything alive.
Uh-huh. I hear ya. But start small, experiment. Don't be afraid to fail.
Okay, no pressure.
Even a tiny herb garden on your windowsill. can connect you more deeply to the process of growing food.
That's true.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one inspiring others to join the quest for the perfect farm.
Okay, now that's a goal worth striding for. This whole deep dive has been incredible. We've explored so much.
We have.
The history of farming, the challenges we face, the amazing innovations that are happening, and most importantly, what we can do about it.
And it's been a privilege sharing this journey with you.
Yeah,
And hopefully with all our listeners out there.
couldn't have done it without you.
And it's clear that the quest for the perfect farm, it's not over. It's an ongoing process.
Always learning, always adapting.
Exactly. But I'm optimistic that by working together, farmers, scientists, policymakers, and everyday eaters, we can create a food system that truly nourishes us all.
That's a great note to end on. So to all our listeners out there, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring this world of food and farming.
And happy growing.
And until next time, keep diving deep.